Hello dear friends, welcome to the Rooted Voice US. Today we will tell you about the city that slept beneath a blanket of fog, its lights flickering weakly through the mist like tired stars that had lost their shine. Down beneath the overpass, where the air smelled of rain and exhaust, a 17-year-old boy named Malik huddled against the concrete wall, clutching an old jacket to his chest. The night was colder than usual for late autumn, and the cardboard beneath him did little to block the damp. Cars rushed overhead, the sound echoing like waves, and every rumble reminded him that life was still moving somewhere above, even if his world had long since stopped. He wasn't born on the street. No one ever is. Malik had once had a home, a small apartment with yellow walls, a mother who worked double shifts at the hospital, and a sister who used to braid his hair while they watched cartoons. But life, as it does, came with sharp turns. His mother's illness came first, then the hospital bills that multiplied faster than hope could cover them, and when she passed, the system swallowed him. Foster care was supposed to help, but it became another kind of hunger, one that gnawed at the soul instead of the stomach. By 16, Malik had slipped through the cracks completely, choosing the streets over another stranger's couch where he never felt safe. Now, his world was the hum of the highway, the rhythm of footsteps that never stopped, and the smell of cheap coffee from the gas station nearby. He carried everything he owned in a torn backpack: a pair of socks, a small Bible, and a single brown paper bag containing his meal for the night, a half-stale sandwich he'd bought with the last of his coins. He'd planned to save half for the morning, but his stomach had been arguing with his heart since sunset. He tore off a corner of the bread, chewing slowly, as if stretching time could somehow stretch food. The city above had forgotten his name, but he remembered every one of its sounds. The laughter that spilled from bars, the muffled music from passing cars, the lonely wail of a siren that sounded too much like the ache in his chest. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out long ago, leaving behind something quieter, a tired sort of faith, the kind that whispered tomorrow might be different, even when every yesterday said otherwise. A drizzle began, thin and cold. He pulled his jacket tighter, wrapping the sandwich back into its bag. That's when he heard footsteps, soft at first, then closer. Instinctively, he stiffened. Street life had taught him that strangers at night rarely meant good news. A shadow moved through the fog, tall, slow, uncertain. Malik squinted, ready to run if he had to. But as the figure came closer, he saw an older man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a denim jacket soaked from the rain. His hair was matted, his beard gray and rough. The man's eyes, though, were what caught him, tired but kind. He stopped a few feet away. "Son," he said, his voice cracked and low, "you got anything to eat?" Malik hesitated, looking down at the paper bag in his hand. His stomach growled loud and accusing, as if reminding him of his own hunger. But the man looked colder than the night itself, shivering under the streetlight. Malik had seen people walk past him every day pretending he didn't exist, their eyes sliding away as if poverty was contagious. He remembered how that felt, to be unseen, unheard, unloved. He sighed, unwrapping the sandwich and breaking it in half. "Here," he said softly, handing the larger piece to the man. The stranger blinked, surprised. "You sure?" Malik nodded, forcing a small smile. "I've eaten enough." It was a lie, but a kind one. The man took the food with trembling hands, his eyes glistening. They sat in silence, eating under the overpass while the rain played a rhythm on the concrete above. When they finished, the man wiped his mouth with his sleeve and turned to Malik. "You got a good heart," he said quietly. "Don't lose it. The world will try to take it from you, but don't let it." Malik shrugged, unsure how to answer. The man stood, pulling his jacket tighter. "I'll see you again when the sun's up." Before Malik could ask what he meant, the stranger walked off into the fog, disappearing like he'd never been there. The boy sat, still for a long time, the words echoing in his mind. The rain eased, replaced by the faint hum of dawn somewhere beyond the gray sky. He closed his eyes, clutching his backpack, and whispered a small prayer he hadn't said in months. "God, just one good day." He didn't know it yet, but that prayer had already been heard. And by the time the morning light reached the city, the rumble of 300 engines would answer it. The first light of morning crept through the cracks in the overpass, spilling across the concrete like liquid gold. Malik stirred beneath his thin blanket, the sound of engines rumbling in the distance, threading through his half-dreams. At first, he thought it was just traffic, the normal morning rush of commuters heading into the city. But this sound was different, louder, deeper, like thunder rolling over the earth. It came in waves, growing closer, filling the air with vibration. Malik sat up, rubbing his eyes, confusion pulling him fully awake. The rumble grew until it became a roar. Then, from the fog, they appeared, motorcycles, dozens of them, chrome gleaming under the pale sun. They came 2 by 2, then 3 by 3, until the entire street was a river of engines and leather vests. Malik's heart pounded. He stood, backing against the concrete wall, unsure whether to run or stay still. The noise was deafening now, the smell of gasoline mixing with morning mist. He counted 20 bikes, then 50, then 100, then more, until it felt like the whole world had shown up on 2 wheels. The convoy slowed as it reached the underpass, engines rumbling low, disciplined, almost reverent. Malik swallowed hard, his breath clouding in the cold air. He'd never seen anything like it. Men and women of every shade and age, faces solemn, eyes fixed on him. Then one bike pulled forward, its rider dismounting. A tall black man with a braided beard and heavy gloves walked toward him, his boots thudding softly on the wet ground. His jacket bore a patch across the chest that read "Iron Promise Brotherhood." The same words were stitched on every vest in sight. The man stopped a few feet away and lifted his helmet, revealing kind eyes framed by lines of age and experience. "You Malik?" he asked. Malik hesitated, voice barely a whisper. "Yeah." The man nodded slowly. "You fed our brother." Malik blinked, confused. "What?" The man's eyes softened. "The man who came to you last night, he's one of us." Malik's breath caught. The stranger from the night before flashed in his mind, the gray beard, the denim jacket, the tired smile. He asked for food," Malik stammered. The biker nodded. "And you gave it to him, your last meal." The roar of engines dimmed as riders began shutting off their bikes one by one until silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the distant cry of a seagull. The leader gestured, and several bikers stepped forward carrying bags, food, clothes, blankets. "We're here to repay kindness," he said simply. "Our brother told us what you did. He said he saw something in your eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. Mercy." Malik felt his throat tighten. He shook his head. "I just gave him food." The man smiled faintly. "That's what mercy looks like, son." A woman in a red bandana stepped forward, holding out a thermos of coffee. "You must be freezing," she said gently. Malik took it, his hands trembling. The warmth hit his palms and something inside him cracked open. He tried to speak, but the words came out as a sob. The man put a hand on his shoulder. "Eat, drink, rest. You ain't alone anymore." Malik nodded, tears blurring his vision. Around him, riders. Unpacked breakfast, eggs, biscuits, fruit, steaming coffee poured into paper cups. Someone brought a chair. Someone else brought socks and boots. Within minutes, the cold underpass that had been Malik's home turned into a camp of noise and life, laughter rising above the steady hum of idle bikes. He ate slowly, disbelief shadowing every bite. These strangers, these giants of steel and thunder, were treating him like family. The leader watched him quietly before saying, "Our brother, his name's Duke. He's the founder of this brotherhood. Every year before we ride for our charity drive, he tests us. He goes out alone, looks for someone who'll show kindness without knowing who he is. Last night, that someone was you." Malik froze mid-bite, the truth hitting him like sunlight through clouds. He was testing people? The leader nodded. "Yeah, most folks don't stop, they don't see. But you did." Malik stared at his hands, the ones that had held that sandwich, and felt a strange mixture of pride and disbelief. "I didn't do it for a test," he said softly. The man smiled. "That's why you passed." A murmur of laughter rippled through the group, warm and approving. One of the riders, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes, added, "Duke said you gave him hope, kid. Said you reminded him what this ride's supposed to mean." Malik didn't know what to say. He just sat there, holding the coffee like it was something holy. The leader looked around and raised his voice. "Brothers and sisters, you know what we do when someone restores the promise." The bikers shouted as one, "We ride for him." Engines fired back to life one by one, the sound swelling into a chorus that made the ground tremble. The leader turned to Malik. "We ride today in your name, son. You gave with nothing. Now we'll give you everything we can." Malik could barely breathe as the roar of 300 bikes rose around him. The morning sun broke through the fog then, hitting the chrome and leather, turning the whole underpass into a river of light. Malik stood there in the middle of it, overwhelmed, clutching his cup of coffee, watching strangers honor a boy the world had forgotten. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. The convoy moved like a living thing, 300 engines thundering through the city streets in a procession that turned heads and stopped traffic. Malik rode in the middle of it all, squeezed onto the back of the leader's bike, his hands gripping the leather jacket in front of him, heart pounding so hard it drowned out even the roar of engines. People stepped out of shops and cars to watch as the river of chrome and thunder flowed past, their faces reflecting surprise, awe, and a kind of reverence. The bikers weren't rowdy or wild. They rode with purpose, steady and proud, a line of humanity bound by compassion. At the front, the leader raised a gloved hand every now and then, signaling turns as if guiding something sacred. Malik's eyes darted. Everywhere, storefronts, streetlights, the wide eyes of children who waved as the convoy passed. He couldn't believe this was real. Yesterday, he'd been invisible. Today, the world had stopped to see him. They rode for nearly an hour before turning into a large parking lot beside the diner just off the highway, the kind of place that smelled of bacon, coffee, and time itself. As the engines quieted, the air filled with laughter, conversation, the clinking of helmets on handlebars. The bikers parked in perfect rows, their bikes gleaming under the late morning sun. The leader, whose name Malik now knew, was Reggie. Duke's right-hand man patted Malik's shoulder. "Come on, son, time for breakfast." Malik followed him into the diner, nerves buzzing. The place went silent for a moment as 300 bikers filled the seats, but then the waitress, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, smiled and said, "Well, it's about time someone brought some noise in here." The room erupted in laughter, and just like that, the tension melted. Malik sat at the booth by the window, still trying to take it all in. Plates began arriving, Eggs, pancakes, sausage, toast, more food than he'd seen in months. A biker slid a plate toward him. "Eat, brother," she said with a grin. "You earned it." Malik's throat tightened. He whispered a small "thank you" and started to eat, each bite heavy with disbelief and gratitude. Between mouthfuls, Reggie told him more about Duke. "He started this whole thing 20 years ago," he said. "Used to be homeless himself after the war. Said he owed the world one good deed for every bad day he survived." Malik listened, stunned. "So he knew what it was like." "Better than most," Reggie said. "That's why he does it. He sends one of us out before every charity ride to see if the world still has kindness left in it. Some years we don't find much, but then someone like you comes along." Malik stared down at his plate, tears blurring his vision. "I didn't do anything special," he said softly. "I just gave him food." Reggie leaned forward. "Kid, that's exactly why it's special." Outside, a few riders had started unloading boxes from their trucks, clothes, blankets, canned goods. A small crowd of locals had gathered, drawn by the noise and curiosity. Someone began live streaming, the caption reading, "Homeless Teens Kindness Inspires 300 Bikers." The video spread like fire, comments flooding in from strangers across the world, faith in humanity restored. "This boy is proof there's still good out there. Where can we help?" By the time Malik finished his second cup of coffee, the story was everywhere. People in town started arriving with donations, bags of clothes, food, even cash. A local reporter asked for an interview, but Malik shook his head. He didn't want fame. He wanted to understand why all of this was happening. Reggie clapped him on the back. "You gave when you had nothing," he said. "That's the kind of story the world needs to hear right now." The diner owner stepped forward holding a set of keys. "We've got a small storage room out back," he said. "It ain't much, but it's dry and warm. You can stay there till you get on your feet." Malik tried to speak, but his voice broke. He nodded instead, eyes shining. The bikers cheered. Someone shouted, "To Malik!" And 300 voices answered, "To Malik!" The sound shook the windows, a wave of joy and thunder. For the first time in his life, Malik felt what it meant to be seen, not as a problem to be solved or a shadow to be ignored, but as someone whose kindness had value. He stepped outside into the sunlight, the warmth washing over him, and for a moment he just stood there, eyes closed, listening to the soft hum of engines idling in harmony. In that sound, he heard more than machines. He heard belonging. He heard redemption. He heard the answer to a prayer he hadn't known he'd made. By afternoon, the parking lot outside the diner had transformed into something that looked like a festival. The Iron Promise Brotherhood had set up tables and grills, turning their charity ride into a full-blown community event. Families came with their kids, church groups brought supplies, and people who had never spoken to a homeless person before in their lives were shaking Malik's hand and thanking him for reminding them what kindness looked like. The air was thick with the smell of barbecue and gasoline, laughter bouncing off the chrome of hundreds of bikes lined up like guardians around the lot. Malik moved through it all in a kind of daze, still trying to make sense of how quickly the world could shift from cold to warm, from lonely to full. Reporters tried to corner him, cameras flashing, but the bikers formed a protective wall, guiding him toward a quieter corner under the awning. "Let him breathe," Reggie told them. "He's lived enough stories for one lifetime." Malik sat on the curb, watching the crowd. He noticed an old woman handing out lemonade, a young boy handing a sandwich to another man sleeping under the trees. And it struck him that kindness was contagious, the simplest act, spreading like wildfire once someone dared to start it. Reggie joined him, handing him a fresh bottle of water. "You see this?" he asked, nodding toward the crowd. "This right here is why Duke sends us out. The world forgets how to care, and then someone like you reminds them." Malik looked down. "I didn't remind anyone. I just did what I wish someone would have done for me." Reggie smiled. "And that's exactly the point." The sound of an engine caught Malik's attention. A single bike pulled into the lot, order heavier, its rider moving slow and steady. The crowd turned as the man removed his helmet. It was Duke. He looked exactly as Malik remembered. Denim jacket, gray beard, eyes tired but bright. The noise died down as he walked toward Malik, every rider stepping aside as if parting the sea. Duke stopped in front of him and smiled. "Told you I'd see you when the sun came up." Malik stood, unsure what to say. Duke reached out and clasped his shoulder. "You did something most folks don't do anymore. You gave without asking. You saw a man, not a burden." Malik shook his head. "I didn't know who you were." "Exactly," Duke said. "If you did, it wouldn't have meant the same." The older man turned to the crowd. "Brothers and sisters, this young man reminded me why we ride. It ain't about the chrome or the road. It's about the promise we made, to find good where the world's gone numb." The bikers roared in. Agreement, engines firing once in unison, the sound rolling across the sky like thunder. Duke looked back at Malik. "You ready to see what comes next?" Malik frowned. "What do you mean?" Duke nodded toward the far end of the lot, where a group of riders stood beside a gleaming black motorcycle. The bike was spotless, its tank polished until it looked like a mirror. A small tag hung from the handlebar to Malik from the Brotherhood. Malik's mouth fell open. You're giving me a bike?" Reggie laughed. "We're giving you a start. What you do with it is up to you." Duke stepped closer. "Every man needs something that moves him forward. Let this be yours." Malik's hands trembled as he touched the seat, the leather warm from the sun. "I don't know how to ride," he admitted. Duke grinned. "You'll learn. The road teaches quick." The crowd cheered again, some chanting his name, others clapping him on the back. Tears stung his eyes as the realization hit him. He wasn't just being helped, he was being welcomed. Duke handed him a small envelope. Inside was a photo of the Iron Promise riders from years past, their first charity ride. On the back was a single line written in Duke's neat handwriting, "Kindness is the only road that never ends." Malik tucked it into his jacket like a treasure. The rest of the day passed in a blur of smiles, music, and roaring engines. People left donations at his feet, money, clothes, a small cross necklace from a preacher who said, "You're living proof that God still moves through the streets." By sundown, the crowd began to thin, the last of the bikers lingering near the diner. Malik stood with Reggie and Duke, watching the sky fade to purple. "You still hungry, son?" Duke asked. Malik smiled. "Not tonight, sir. For the first time in a long time, I'm full." Duke nodded, satisfaction softening his face. "Good. Remember that feeling. One day, you'll feed someone else." Malik didn't know then how true those words would be, but as the last rays of light touched the horizon, he made himself a silent promise. He would never let the world make him hard, no matter how cold it got again. Night settled over the town like a soft blanket, and the last of the engines faded into the distance, leaving behind only the hum of memory and the faint smell of fuel on the breeze. Malik sat on the diner steps, the new bike parked a few feet away, gleaming even in the low light. The stars began to appear one by one, scattered like tiny reminders that, even in the darkest sky, there were still things that shone. Reggie sat beside him, his heavy frame casting a long shadow across the pavement. "Feels different, don't it?" he said. Malik nodded slowly. "Yeah, like the world finally turned to look at me." Reggie chuckled. "That's the thing about kindness. It's louder than people think." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant crickets and the faint hiss of tires on the highway. Malik looked down at the key Duke had given him. "You really think I can do something with this?" he asked quietly. Reggie turned to him. "Son, you already did. You change people just by being who you are. The rest will come." The older man stood, stretching his back. "We're heading west tomorrow, but we'll be checking in. You ain't alone, you hear?" Malik nodded again, gripping the key tighter. When Reggie left, the quiet felt heavier but not empty. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. He watched the last headlight disappear down the road, then walked toward the small room the diner owner had promised him. Inside, the walls were bare and the floor uneven, but to Malik, it was a palace. He dropped his bag on the cot and sank down, running a hand over the clean sheets. He had a roof over his head, food in his stomach, and people who'd remembered his name. As he drifted towards sleep, the memory of Duke's words echoed in his mind. Every man needs something that moves him forward. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the dusty window, painting golden lines across the walls. Malik woke with a start, still half expecting to find it all gone. But the sound of engines outside reminded him it was real. 2 bikers from the Iron Promise were waiting by his door, helmets under their arms. "You ready for your first lesson?" one of them asked with a grin. Malik's heart raced. "Now? Ain't no better time," the man said. They took him to an empty lot behind the diner, where the black bike waited like a patient animal. They showed him how to hold the handlebars, how to balance the weight, how to listen to the machine like it was speaking. The first few tries were clumsy. He stalled, tipped too far, nearly dropped it. But each time, the bikers laughed and encouraged him. "You don't ride a bike," one of them said. "You ride your fear till it runs out of gas." By noon, Malik was riding laps around the lot, wind in his face, heart soaring. The roar of the engine under him felt like freedom, pure and wild. Every loop erased a little more of the hunger and loneliness that had once defined him. When he stopped, sweating and grinning, one of the bikers clapped him on the back. "You're a natural, kid. Feels good, don't it?" Malik nodded, breathless. "Feels like I can finally breathe." That night, as he sat on the steps again, he thought about his mother. He could almost hear her voice, soft and steady, telling him she was proud. The next few weeks passed in a blur of change. Malik worked at the diner during the day, learning to cook and clean and in. The evenings he rode with the bikers who stayed behind, each ride stretching farther from the town. People recognized him now. They called him the kid who gave his last meal, the one who reminded everyone that goodness still lived under the noise of the world. But Malik didn't think of himself as a hero. He was just someone who'd been given a second chance, and he intended to spend the rest of his life giving that chance to others. As winter rolled in, he started volunteering at the shelters that had once turned him away, cooking meals for people who slept where he once had. He told them stories, not about fame or bikers or cameras, but about the simple act of seeing another person. He'd hand them plates and say, "You don't have to be rich to feed someone. You just have to remember what hunger feels like." Each time he said it, he felt the truth settle deeper into his bones. One cold evening, as snow began to drift over the town, he parked his bike near the underpass where it had all begun. The spot looked different now, cleaner, quieter, almost peaceful. He sat down on the same patch of concrete and pulled out a sandwich from his jacket. Not because he was hungry, but because he remembered. As he took a bite, he saw movement in the corner of his eye. A man, older, shivering under a blanket. Malik didn't hesitate. He stood, walked over, and handed him the rest of the sandwich. "Eat," he said simply. The man looked up, eyes wide, then took it with a trembling hand. Malik smiled. "It's all right. The world still has good in it." And as the snow fell and the city lights shimmered through the fog, Malik realized he had come full circle. The boy who had once given. His last meal had become the man who never stopped sharing. The road had found him, changed him, and set him free. By the time spring returned, Malik's life had become a rhythm of purpose and peace. He woke early each morning to the smell of coffee from the diner, worked through the day with easy smiles and steady hands, and spent every evening on his bike, following the long roads that stretched beyond town. He'd learned every curve of the land, every whisper of the wind, every hum of the tires against asphalt. Riding wasn't escape anymore. It was prayer. It was connection. It was life moving forward, the way Duke had said it would. Word of his kindness continued to ripple outward. The Iron Promise began calling him Little Brother, a name that stuck like family. They visited often, sometimes rolling through town with convoys so large the ground shook. Each time, the townsfolk gathered to greet them, bringing food and stories, laughter filling the streets where silence used to live. Malik became a symbol of hope without even meaning to. He spoke at schools, at churches, even at city meetings about how small acts mattered. "You don't need much to change somebody's life," he'd tell them, voice calm but sure. "Just enough to care." His words carried weight because they came from truth. He'd known hunger. He'd known the cold bite of concrete on bare skin. And he'd known what it meant when someone finally stopped to listen. People listened now. The diner owner hired more at-risk teens, giving them shifts and a second chance. The bikers turned their annual charity ride into something called Meals in Motion, a nationwide initiative that delivered food and blankets to the homeless. Malik helped organize it, standing on stage in front of crowds that once would have walked past him without a glance. But he never let pride take root. Whenever people asked how, he did it. He'd say the same thing. It started with a sandwich. One summer evening, as orange light bathed the town in warmth, a familiar rumble echoed through the streets. Malik looked up from his bike and smiled before the engines even came into view. Duke had returned. The old man was slower now, his beard whiter, his step heavier, but his eyes still carried that same spark. He dismounted his bike and opened his arms. Malik met him halfway, the hug firm and wordless. "Been keeping an eye on you," Duke said, grinning. "You made good on that promise." Malik chuckled. "Trying to? You taught me well." They sat together outside the diner as the sun dipped low. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't shared that meal?" Duke asked. Malik nodded. "Sometimes, but I think that's the thing about kindness. You can't plan it. You just do it, and the rest follows." Duke smiled, pride shining in his tired eyes. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." They fell silent for a while, watching the light fade into dusk. Finally, Duke stood and handed Malik a small object wrapped in leather. "This belonged to me when I started the Brotherhood," he said. Malik unwrapped it carefully and found a silver ring engraved with the Iron Promise symbol, a wheel entwined with roots. "You earned it," Duke said. "Now you lead the next ride." Malik tried to protest, but Duke waved him off. Every road needs new hands. That night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Malik led his first ride as chapter head of the Iron Promise. 300 engines followed him down the highway. There, lights merging into a river of gold and fire. The wind whipped against his face, carrying with it the voices of everyone who had ever helped him. The laughter of Maya from the shelter, the steady hum of Reggie's wisdom, the ghost of his mother's lullabies. He felt all of them at his back as he rode. The convoy stretched for miles, people lining the roads to wave as they passed, signs reading, "Be kind, we ride for hope," and "Thank you, Malik." He didn't think of himself as a hero. He thought of himself as a boy who had been given one chance to do right and took it. When they reached the old overpass where his story began, Malik slowed and stopped. The bikers followed, forming a circle around the same patch of concrete where a hungry teenager had once shared his last meal. He dismounted, took off his helmet, and looked at the spot in silence. The air was still heavy with memory. Then he knelt, pulled a sandwich from his jacket, and placed it gently on the ground. "For whoever comes next," he whispered. The engines revved in unison, a chorus of thunder rolling across the fields. And in that sound lived everything: the sorrow and the salvation, the loneliness and the love, the reminder that the smallest act of kindness can move mountains when done with a full heart. As the engines faded into the distance, the road shimmered under the moonlight, endless and alive, carrying Malik's promise forward into tomorrow. When the roar of the engines finally faded into the night, the silence that followed felt sacred, like the earth itself was holding its breath to remember the moment. Malik stood there alone. Under the overpass, the cool wind brushing against his face, carrying the faint smell of fuel and wildflowers. He looked up at the stars, bright, scattered, infinite, and thought about how far he'd come. A year ago, he'd been invisible, a shadow moving through the city unseen. Now, his story rode on the backs of strangers who had become his family. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks, not for the fame or the attention, but for the second chance he'd been given, the reminder that kindness was still the most powerful thing a person could offer. Behind him, the road stretched into the dark, and for a moment he imagined all the people out there who were still hungry, still lost, still waiting for someone to see them. That thought became his purpose. Over the next months, Malik and the road keepers grew their movement beyond the highways. They partnered with shelters and food banks, created youth programs, and built mobile kitchens that followed their rides from town to town. Every plate they served came with a message stamped on the napkin: "You are seen. You are loved. You are not alone." The phrase became a kind of anthem, spreading across states, painted on walls and stitched into jackets. Malik would sometimes laugh at how far it had all gone, how a boy with nothing but a sandwich and faith had somehow started something bigger than himself. But late at night, when the noise quieted and he found himself staring at the same kind of sky he used to sleep under, he never forgot the simplicity of it. One person in need, another choosing to care. That was all it took. The following year, Duke passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy etched into the hearts of everyone he'd ever met. Malik led his memorial ride, thousands of riders joining from across the country. As the convoy reached the horizon, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing everything in gold. Malik raised his hand, signaling silence, and spoke into the wind. He taught us that the road gives back what you put into it. So if you ride with love, it'll carry you home. The engines rumbled in agreement, a symphony of grief and gratitude. That night, Malik sat by his bike and looked at the ring Duke had given him. He slipped it off for the first time, hung it on a thin chain, and placed it around his neck. "Rest easy, old man," he whispered. "I'll keep the promise." From that day forward, he carried the Brotherhood like a heartbeat. Every new rider who joined received the same lesson. The road doesn't belong to you. You belong to the road. It remembers what you do. Under Malik's guidance, the movement became unstoppable. They opened their first permanent shelter in Duke's name, the house on Highway 47, a place that offered warmth and dignity to anyone who walked through its doors. Each wall told a story, painted by volunteers, murals of bikers and strangers, of hands reaching out, of meals shared under moonlight. Malik spent hours there whenever he wasn't on the road, greeting newcomers with that same quiet smile that had once disarmed Duke himself. People would ask him how it felt to have changed so many lives, and he always said the same thing. It's not about changing the world. It's about changing one moment for someone. The rest follows. One evening, years later, a teenager came into the shelter, hungry and shaken from the cold. Malik found him sitting alone by the heater, holding a paper bag with half a sandwich inside. "You okay, son?" he asked. The boy looked up, eyes wary but hopeful. "Yeah," he said quietly, "just trying to find somewhere warm." Malik smiled and sat beside him. "You're in the right place." He looked down at the sandwich. "You got food, that's good." The boy hesitated. "You want some?" he asked, offering the bag. Malik felt tears sting his eyes. He took a small bite, smiled, and said, "Thank you. That's the best thing I've had all day." The boy grinned, shoulders relaxing for the first time. And just like that, the story began again. Later that night, as Malik locked up the shelter, he looked out at the highway shimmering under the streetlights and whispered, "You were right, Duke. The road never forgets." The engines might have quieted, the faces might have changed, but the promise lived on in every shared meal, every open hand, every act of compassion passed down like a torch in the dark. And somewhere, out beyond the glow of the town, the wind carried the sound of distant engines, a reminder that kindness, once started, never truly stops riding.